Non, rien de rien. Non, je ne regrette rien.
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it's time to look at another Devblog for update 1.87. This is for the new French supersonic aircraft, which is coming to the game in update 1.87, and I'm very happy to see it. After playing it on the dev server, I think it's being slightly overlooked by a lot of people, mainly because we have stuff like the Mitsubishi T2 coming, but for me, a person who isn't really interested in the top tier of stuff, this seems like one of those planes that I could really get behind. So, the Super Mystère B.2 is what you see before you, and the first thing that I want to point out is the fact that this is going to be a 9093, which is supersonic, technically, and also has access to 2 sets of air-to-air missiles. Now, what are those air-to-air missiles? Well, on the dev server, it had access to AIM-9Bs, so these are the current Sidewinders that you find on the F-100D, not the upgraded ones that we are getting next patch for planes, the AIM-9Es. Also, on top of this, it gets access to what is known as AA-20s. Now, AA-20s, or Nord AA.20s, are massive guided missiles. These work very similarly to the missiles that you find on the FJ-4B, the bullpups, and the F-100D. Basically, you launch them and then you keyboard control them to the enemy. And what is interesting about them is the fact that these are air-to-air versions. So technically, we haven't had these in game before. The bullpups are specifically air-to-ground missiles. The other plane, which also gets these and also gets the ground variant of them, the G91R4, is unfortunately a premium. So in this case, this is the first time another nation in its actual tech tree, and not a premium, has got its hands on some air-to-guided missiles when it comes to, actually moving it with, moving it with your keyboard instead of being locked on. So the way that these work are proximity fuse, it's as simple as that. Like, they get about 15 meters away from the target, and the idea is that they explode. We did a little bit of testing on the dev server. They didn't work exactly like that, but they generally worked around that idea. In my opinion, they won't be too useful, because obviously a lot of jet fights, especially around the 9.0, which this is going to find itself, are very much not really elongated, long, drawn-out, chasey fights. Instead, they are turny-turny, Bernie fights, I think is the way to put it, especially with now the new supersonic jets coming in. So they probably won't be too useful, but I just like the fact that they're here. One of the things that I personally really enjoy about War Thunder is with all of these new top tier stuff, I'm not too interested in it from a historical point of view, but when it comes to mechanics, such as the radar, such as the AGMs, such as the new destructible terrain, that is my jam when it comes to update 1.87. And it seems like for the last year or so, once all of these modernized vehicles have been added, what I've personally been looking for is the mechanics involved, such as the scouting, how helicopters work, air-to-air missiles, all of this stuff is what I'm interested in. So to see an expansion of that, from my point of view, is wonderful. Even though a lot of people won't use it, and they'll definitely favor the AIM-9Bs, which you find here, it is just one of those nice things that it's being considered to be used, even though it may not be that useful. It very much aligns with the ideas of stuff like Shrug music when they were added to the game. The idea that it wouldn't be that useful, but it was a lovely little mechanic which they could add. So hopefully we get more of a expansion into this type of missile instead of just the guided air-to-air missiles that we see, such as the Sidewinders and the ones on the Soviet MiG-19 PT. On top of this, with the Super Mystère, it does say that it is supersonic. The issue is, it is supersonic at 11,000 meters. So, when we're talking about the ground, it is not supersonic, which is why it's not a 10.0 jet. A lot of people were pointing out to me that this is not supersonic. It is a supersonic jet, just not where you want it to be. In-game, the supersonic nature of this machine will only ever be used if you really drag people up high, or if you get into fights with superior performing opponents at higher altitudes, e.g. the T2. So, with that said, even if you get to those heights, it's very hard to believe that this will be the fastest aircraft around, unless you are just being at your BR. Because the Super Mystère B.2, at least on the dev server, was, I believe, 9.0 or 9.3 when I had a look at it, which I thought was kind of low for this, especially since we have Sabres, which are now 9.3, such as the CL-13B, we also had the Japanese Sabres put up to 9.3. So for me, this could easily be a 9.3 plane. Not just because of the fact that it can go fast at high altitudes, but because it has access to AIM-9Bs, because it has access to an incredible roll rate, an incredible turn. Overall, this is looking like a really nice aircraft to fly. And just on top of it, it has two DEFA 30mm. So for me, when it comes to jet combat, I like the DEFAs. I really like them. It's a toss-up between them and the 50 calibers, or the 50 cals from the Americans. I actually really like the F2's guns, the 20mm, but overall, you only see that present in very small circumstances when it comes to planes. So it's either 50 cals or, DEFAs are the way to go, in my opinion. So when it comes to stuff like the Super Mystère B.2, I am happy that its offensive armament is the two DEFAs. They do a lot of damage. You're not going to have to stay on target for too long. And since we're getting faster and faster and faster in jets, it's the margins for error and the margins for shooting are becoming incredibly small. So you need something that packs a hell of a punch. And luckily the 30mm DEFAs do that. On top of this, the maneuverability thing, I don't think, should be overlooked. So, for the longest time, the reason why the CL-13A was dominant was not because of speed, it was because of maneuverability and acceleration. Those were the two key factors that put it above the rest, and also the 50 cals helped, but it wasn't a huge factor. The main thing was, if somebody got on you, and you're in a CL-13A, you could defensively fly yourself out of that situation, where a lot of other planes, it was very hard to do. On top of this, what you could also do at the higher levels was pretty much out-accelerate everything that was around, unless stuff had energy advantages on you, and then that was a different story. But the main thing was, in any situation you found yourself in the CL, you could get out of it. And a lot of planes can't do that, such as the Hunter, or such as, I suppose, even the F-100 nowadays, or anything like that. But the Sabres could, which is why they were meta for the longest time. Now, the Super Mystère, I see as kind of the same thing, where it has a really good turn rate, it has a really good roll rate, it does have speed behind it. It may not be the fastest thing in the sky, but it does have good speed. Then it has the air-to-air missiles. It has a good package overall to be able to get out of these situations that I describe. So it might be good in the defensive flying. And as we're seeing, they are pushing a lot of 9.0 premiums. They are also pushing a lot of 9.3 aircraft. So, the F-86, F-40, the CL-13B. And the question is, will air have the same fate as ground? One of the big problems that ground has is the majority of the time, when you're playing around 9.0, 9.3, you are up-tiered into 10.0. And the reason for this is because people want to play 10.0. They want to play the best vehicles. In air, we've also seen this trend with F-100s and MiG-19 PTs, but now we're getting an even further expansion with the MiG-19S and also the Mitsubishi T2. Is it going to be the case that machines like this, the Super Mystère, are up-tiered into that 10.0 bracket, and then we have to understand how good will it be at that bracket? Because you can see its strengths at 9.0, 9.3. The fact it has the speed, the maneuverability, the guns, it has pretty much everything for a 9.0, 9.3 aircraft. There isn't really a downside. But the problem is, can it make that jump? Because a lot of aircraft can't make that jump. But I think the Super Mystère does. I think it can make that jump for the reasons of its maneuverability, the reasons for its role, and the reasons for its tail. If you are against an enemy which is inherently faster than you, has more tools than you in the form of stuff like AIM-9Es, has more speed than you do, has more acceleration, what you have to do is defensively fly your heart out, hope that they overshoot or hope that they screw up, and then you can turn on them and batter them. The Super Mystère gives you that opportunity to be able to do it, where other machines do not. It definitely reminds me of the Sabre in that regard. The other thing we also have to talk about with the Super Mystère is the fact that the French jets in general, in my opinion, have had a rough time of it in War Thunder. The Vautours were very good when they came out. Both 8.0, both really fast. It was very hard to do anything against them. Nowadays at 9.0, they're not as good, but they still get the job done. They aren't the issue. The issue is stuff like the Orujan and the Barujan, which have had just awful times in War Thunder because of, well, you've got the matchmaking and also the meta vehicles. Because of the way France is situated in War Thunder, and because of, the player base that plays it, generally you'll end up with a lot of mixed battles or a lot of Allied versus Axis battles at top tier. And what I have found with my French jets is that my win rates are diabolical. They are awful, and it's mainly because of stuff like the Barujan and the Orujan. These are not top tier top BR fighters, and they were going up constantly against these fighters and were getting outdone in every way. Now, France has a competitive around 9.0 BR aircraft, and the question is, will it be able to now compete against the big boys, or will we have the same situation that the Orujan and the Barujan were in, where they were getting up-tiered into 9.0 when they first came out and getting annihilated? Will this get up-tiered into 10.0 and have the same fate? A lot of people have also criticized the addition of the Super Mystère because France is obviously very well known for a lot of their supersonic vehicles. They have a lot of jets which are very interesting, which have a lot of history behind them. And all I would say is patience is a virtue, in the famous words of Oscar Wilde. The thing about the French is because they have so many of these aircraft, you know for a fact you have something to look forward to. You have a ton of options which are going forward. You are not in a situation similar to Britain where you have a bunch of just less than Mach 1 aircraft and then above Mach 2. With France, you have options. And for the Super Mystère B.2, it's a nice step in that direction. Kind of like how the MiG-19S is it for the Germans, or, the Mitsubishi T2. It is a necessary step that France has to make before they break into the crazy stuff that they have. And I think a lot of people are going to be disappointed with the fact that this one has been announced, but I wouldn't be too disappointed. At this moment, we know that it's going to be at a competitive BR if it fights at that competitive BR. It's going to be good. It's going to be one of the top vehicles at that BR. So therefore, you should be kind of happy about it. Hopefully in the future, we do see more of these wonderful French jets. They do have a nice tinge to them. They do have a wonderful model. They have massive engines, and they have great maneuverability. It does remind me a lot of the Sabres back in the day in the game. And even today, the Sabres very much act like it. Hopefully, in time, with the Super Mystère B.2, it will be allowed to fight at its BR, and it will be allowed to dominate. But, at least in the first few months of this update coming out, I unfortunately don't envision that happening. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.